Hello everybody! Welcome to the YouTube channel. My name is Aviator Aaron, a flight instructor. I welcome you here today. We're going to talk today about the four forces of flight, which are as follows: thrust, lift, weight, and drag. Thrust. Thrust is the forward force produced by the power plant or propeller or rotor. It opposes or overcomes the force of drag. As a general rule, it acts parallel to the longitudinal axis, which would mean from the tail of the aircraft through the nose of the aircraft, out to the front. It's pulling us toward the front. Here are a couple different examples of thrust. Bottom left corner and top left corner are two examples of afterburning turbojet engines. The top right corner is a turbofan engine, something you typically see on like a 737 or perhaps an Airbus or even a smaller business jet. On the right side is what we're most familiar with, which would be a piston engine, which we have in a 172. Most general aviation trainers will have this. And on the bottom of the screen, we have kind of a combination of a a turbofan and propeller engine, which would be a turboprop. Next up is lift. We got to talk a little bit about how lift works here. You're a pilot. We got to know this part. And I think that this part is very interesting to learn, to be honest with you. Lift is a force that is produced by the dynamic effect of the air acting on the airfoil, and it acts perpendicular to the flight path through the center of lift and perpendicular to the lateral axis. In level flight, lift opposes the downward force of weight. Here's a basic airfoil. This is the exact replication of what a Cessna 172 wing would look like. When a wing is flying through the air, it's going to be applying a downward force on the air around it. Now, if you remember from elementary school, we talked about Newton and his laws. His third law states that for every action, there is an equal and an opposite reaction. What's happening is the wing is flying through the air as it's accelerated and it's beginning to push down. Well, that force is going to oppose it, and it's going to create an upward force, which is going to bring you through the air. Let's talk a little bit about what's actually happening here, the science behind what's creating flight. Your first arrow there on the far left side is moving towards your airfoil. When it reaches the leading edge of the wing or the front of the wing, you get what's called a stagnation point. And the air is going to separate. It's going to go over the top of the airfoil and over the bottom of the airfoil. This creates a high pressure on the bottom and a low pressure on top. This is very similar to if you're driving down the road at 50, 60 miles an hour at a good speed, and you stick your hand out the window, flat, and if you pitch your hand clockwise or counterclockwise, if you pitch it up, the front of your hand up, you'll notice that your hand is going to want to go up towards the roof of the car, and vice versa. If you go down, it's going to want to go down towards the ground. This is exactly what's happening when a wing flies. Let's talk a little bit about the Venturi effect. The Venturi effect is when a fluid is forced through a smaller orifice. Your pressure is going to decrease and the velocity is going to increase. Now, this is important to us because this is exactly what happens on the top of a wing. When you reach the leading edge, you've got your neutral pressure, neutral velocity. You hit the leading edge of the wing, point of stagnation, and over the top of the wing, you're going to have an increase in velocity. So the air is going to be traveling over the wing quicker, and the pressure is going to decrease. Well, this is what's creating that difference in pressure from the top of the wing and the bottom of the wing. And if you know anything about weather, a high pressure system is always trying to chase a low pressure system. And this is why, well, we're going to get into this a little bit deeper here in just a minute. Let's take a look at this now that we've had it explained. Now let's define some terms a little bit here, because it's not just about high pressure, low pressure. There are three more terms that are important for us to know. They're not that bad. They make sense if you take it slow and think about it. We've got our high pressure on the bottom and our low pressure on the top. We've established that. Now, from the trailing edge of the wing through the leading edge out towards the front is called your chord line. This is pretty much just the direction that the wing is pointed. If you were to draw this invisible line from trailing edge to leading edge, this is what you're going to have. These blue lines here is called your relative wind. If we're in level flight here, we're always going to have a little bit of a nose up attitude to produce that lift. So for the purpose of this example here, let's just assume that level with the screen is the direction of travel. Now, the relative wind is important for this next part here, AOA, or angle of attack. The difference between the chord line and the relative wind is your angle of attack. Now, check this out. If we're at high speed, our angle of attack is going to be lower. We can see it's just 3 degrees on the left side. At an average speed, we might have an AOA of 6 degrees. And at a slower speed, we're going to have a higher angle of attack. Now, in a future episode, tune in, and we're going to do a deep dive into stalls, and we're going to talk about that. When a wing stalls, when you reach your critical angle of attack, which is not defined in the POH of any aircraft we're flying, in this example on the far right side, if you were to get to 14 degrees nose up, for example, would say that's your critical angle of attack. That's when a wing stalls, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the future. Just a few simple terms. There's your Venturi effect one more time, full picture so you can see what's happening. Your air enters on the left side, it's compressed, velocity increases, pressure decreases. Now let's put this together. Looks a little chaotic, right? But we built up the building blocks one by one. So we can see what's happening with our wind. We can see it going over the leading edge there, over the top of the airfoil and bottom of the airfoil in the purple lines. We see our high pressure and we see our low pressure. And now we've put our vocabulary together, so you can see your green line, chord line, the blue line is the relative wind, and you can just barely see it. Near the front of the wing is the angle of attack. Pretty easy. It's very important to talk about this next part here, which is wake turbulence. As mentioned previously, high pressure is always trying to get to low pressure, and it has 2 ways it can do that. It can go over the back of the wing, or it can go over the outside of the wing on the wing tip. Now typically it's going to go outside, and it's going to be most noticeable from the wing tip. And this is going to create what's called a wake vortice, or wake turbulence. We're going to talk about some of the dangers of wake turbulence in just a few minutes. Our next effect is weight. Weight is the force that's pulling us downward towards the earth. It's the combined load of the aircraft itself, the crew, the fuel, and the cargo or the baggage. Weight is a force that pulls the aircraft downward because of the force of gravity. It opposes lift and acts vertically downward to the aircraft's center of gravity. Next term, drag. Drag is a rearward retarding force caused by the disruption of airflow by the wing, rotor, fuselage, and other protruding objects. As a general rule, drag opposes thrust and acts rearward parallel to the relative wind. Now there are 2 main types of drag. First, parasite drag, skin friction drag, rivets, anything that's protruding from the airfoil, sharp corners, anything that's not streamlined is parasite drag. And you can pause and read that if you so choose to. Induced drag. Induced drag is caused by lift. More specifically, it's caused by the wingtip vortices, which are created from the low and high pressure areas above and below the wing. As mentioned, the high pressure wants to get to the low pressure, and you can see it here. It can do this 2 ways, the trailing edge of the wing and the wing tips. As the air flows off the wingtip, it turns upward beyond the tip of the wing before turning upside down in the vortex, creating a downwash inside and behind the trailing edge of the wing. Take a look at this. Aircraft flies over, it's going to cut right here. Look at that air rotating. That's a pretty large tower. And you can see that air really has some rotation to it. Now, it's not something that you ever want to fly through. So when you're coming in behind an aircraft, this is one of the dangers of getting into wake turbulence. That's what it looks like if you get caught in wake turbulence. I was told a story by a DPE that he was taking off in a 737 after a 747 took off, and he got in this wake turbulence, and it nearly flipped a 737 over, which is a very large aircraft, so think of something like Southwest. That's a pretty large aircraft, And if it can roll that, imagine what it can do to us in a single engine piston aircraft. Let's back up a little bit here. I like this diagram here from the FAA. You can see the wake turbulence is rotating and it's descending. So it's got a sink rate of several hundred feet a minute. Good technique as an aviator is to stay nominally 500 to 1,000 feet above an aircraft's flight path. Typically, a smaller piston aircraft, or maybe even a smaller multi-engine aircraft, you're not really going to have a problem. It might be a little bit uncomfortable. It might get a little bumpy. But when we start getting into a business jet or regional jets or international carrier jets, so think a 747 or something like that, if we get in that wake turbulence, it's going to be a bad day for us. So we always want to stay above with the wake turbulence as it's sinking. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a future video, but good technique is if you're taking off behind a large aircraft, you want to take off before that aircraft took off, because remember, he's generating that wake turbulence, and you want to stay above that wake turbulence. Now, if it's a jet, they're climbing pretty quick, so do what you need to do to climb and go ahead and turn on course to go ahead and get away from that aircraft's flight path. And similar principle for when you're landing, you always want to remain above it. So if you're landing behind a heavy jet, you want to stay above their approach path and land after where they touch down. To the very end here, this kind of puts everything we talked about together now. We can see what's happening: thrust, lift, weight, drag. I hope this gives you a better understanding of what we're dealing with here. The FAA believes that it's very important for us to know this, and for good reason. We're pilots. We should know what's happening with our aircraft and how it's flying. It's not magic, it's physics. And I hope you think it's as interesting as I do. I appreciate you for tuning in and watching this video today. There'll be more videos coming out in the near future. This is the first video I've posted to this channel, so everybody's a first-time viewer who's watching this. I appreciate you for watching. Tune in again next time. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and leave me a comment if you feel led to do so. God bless you, and thank you for your time today.